I've seen a lot of people just be like, oh, well, I'm going to create community too. And I feel like they don't really understand why they're creating it. And because they don't actually want to use it themselves, that bleeds into how they approach people. You can feel it.
Welcome to the Entail AI podcast, where we go behind the scenes with top marketing leaders and innovators who are driving growth for their brands. In this episode, we welcome Sam Mendelsohn, an e-commerce expert who started in the space in 2011. Recently, Sam has started a new company called Workspace 6, a community for e-commerce founders. Today, we'll take a look at the processes involved in developing and maintaining an online business community.
Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit about your Slack community. Describing, maybe like telling us a little bit about it, like how many people are there, like how active it is, how you started it or why you started it, and so on.
For sure. So basically the quick rundown of how we got started. We didn't actually plan to create it into anything. There was no actual plan. Me and my co-founder, Philip, we were working on another project at the time, just kind of playing around with SaaS and just kind of like playing around with some different ideas that we want to create. And even up to this point, we're not entirely sure what we want to create, but how it came to be was one of the major software providers in our e-commerce space sent out an announcement, basically a price change. And I immediately got, within like getting the email in my inbox, I was at breakfast with some people. I got a email in my inbox. I opened it. I read it. I was like, oh, damn, this price change is kind of bullshit. Whatever. I'm not stoked about it. But I was already, my mind was immediately going on like, how am I going to deal with this? What am I going to do? Like, whatever. Do they have any competitors? Blah, blah. Then I got like one text message from a friend. And they're like, hey, dude, did you just get that email from this provider? What are you going to do? You know what I mean? And I got another text message from another friend. Another text message, another text message. I got up to like 5 text messages of different friends texting me. They're like, hey, what are you going to do? Oh, I'm going to do this to combat their pricing model and blah, blah. I'm thinking about moving to this provider, whatever. So I'm having these like 5 separate conversations, basically repeating information that's like, I'm getting insight from one friend. And I'm like, all right, oh yeah, this person just asked me that. My opinion has now changed because I had this conversation with this person on this text thread. And so I basically texted him, and it was just like a 5-way text like conversation happening. It was just overwhelming. And I was like, I've been meaning to get all my friends into like a Slack channel at some point anyway. I was like, this is stupid. Like I finally just got on, I created a Slack channel or Slack workspace and basically sent everyone an invite. I was like, guys, let's all talk in here. Like this is just so much easier. So that's how it started. And then at first it was just me adding friends that were different founders that I like to talk to that I met over the past 10 years. And then kind of from there, it kind of naturally started evolving where people were starting to ask me like, hey, can I add my co-founder? Oh, can I have this friend and whatever? So I was like, yeah, sure. It's fine. And then it started to kind of compound where more and more people started asking to be added to it. And I started to have to start to think out like systems and processes for how to actually, like, I started to think, I was like, okay, one guy in here is doing 75 million a year. He's a founder of a company. Another guy just asked if he can add his friend, and he's doing like 2 million a year, which is fine. Obviously businesses are different scales and different evolutions, but he's now asking if he can add his friend who just wants to get into e-commerce. And I was like, this is going to get weird really fast if we don't create some controls on it. So we started to kind of create systems around how to process new requests, especially once it started to expand past the amount of people I knew personally. We're now up to 700. So I seeded it with about 15 to 20 people I knew. And then I did an outreach to about 10 or 20 people I'd always just wanted to talk to anyway. I was like, hey, dude, want to like join my Slack channel? And so I basically outreached to a bunch of people, added them, and it kind of went from there. What ended up happening was we had a lot of brands. Like the average amount of revenue was, I think, it was in the first group of people was ranging anywhere from like, I think it was like each founder's brand probably did on average 20 million to 30 million for the first like 30, 40, 50 people that we added. And it's just also, again, it was like aspirational people I just like always want to talk to. And then I posted it online. I was like, hey, anyone want to join a Slack group? And I got like 700 messages. So like on Twitter, it went viral. It went viral in this other like thread that I was in. So I got like 700 messages in total, people wanting to join. And immediately that was when I was really like, okay, I definitely need to create a system around this because I don't know who any of these people are. I don't know why they want to join this community. I don't know much about their companies. I don't know them at all. And I can't just keep adding these people because again, like I don't necessarily want to associate in the community with people that are not of a certain persona or demographic. That kind of led me into being like, okay. And also the other thing too is I wanted to keep it to a certain like type of person, and I felt like it was I was feeling a little bit like a mean girl, being like, no, you can't join, like, and just like looking at their brand and being like, oh, just looking at it and just judging it and being like, well, you can't be in or whatever. So I realized, I was like, all right, I asked the existing cohort of people, I was like, all right, who do we feel comfortable with being in this community? The people that were overwhelmingly that the existing members wanted to be part of this community were founders, co-founders, presidents, VPs in some circumstances, any C-level officer, or a managing partner, or lastly, anyone with 5% equity or more in the company, basically meaning that like a large amount of this person's future is riding on the company they're working in. So the kind of the main line we drew was realizing like, okay, the type of people we want in this community are people that, like, at the end of the day, this is not just a job to them. If this company goes to shit, they are going to be quite, like, their vision for their future is going to have to dramatically adjust, versus someone who, maybe they're a head of marketing. Yes, that's still like a very impactful role to a company. They may still have a ton of knowledge, but at the end of the day, they're just going to go get another job. You know what I mean? It's going to suck. It's going to be like a temporary, like, oh, that's really fucking annoying, I'm back on the job market. But it's not going to be like my entire, like, I feel like I've lost a decade of my life because this didn't pan out. You know what I mean?
All of them are e-commerce?
All of them are e-commerce founders of brands that are 7, 8, or 9 figures. So I think we range anywhere from 1 million to 9. I think the biggest company that's in there is 500 million. So it's kind of across the board. Obviously, as you get larger, the scale of how many people at that scale rapidly diminishes. It's mainly, I think the average is about 8 million a year per brand.
What do you think really attracts them to that community? I mean, now you probably have, okay, first of all, like, how long ago did you start?
I started the Slack group. I created it last October.
Last October. Okay. So it's like more than a year. And so by now you probably have an idea like why they joined, like what value they were looking for there, right?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway that I have with the community is obviously people found value in it, and they tell other people. So like, for example, just this morning, we got like 3 applications of people I don't know. So like, I look through how they hear about it. So a lot of it's word of mouth. I think the main thing that why people find it specifically, and I think this speaks to, I don't know if this speaks to every audience, but it speaks specifically to our audience of members, is that it's extremely lonely being a owner of a company or founder of an e-commerce brand. One, because it's very, very specific type of knowledge that you have to know. So it's not something that, like, it's like talking about Facebook ads or SEO or like automating email flows or product development. There's so many things you have to be good at. So it's incredibly stressful. And I would argue probably one of the worst and hardest businesses you can launch, that outside of maybe a restaurant. I think restaurants are probably the worst business, but I think that e-commerce might be second, because until you get to a certain scale, you have to know so much about so many things. Like, you have to do like forecasting, like marketing, creative, like product development, customer service, operations, like pretty much every span of like a company, you have to know at least enough to operate on a level that allows you to compete in the environment. So one, it's very stressful. It's very intense. It's very, there's not a lot of people that you can kind of relate to professionally. But the other thing too is that in the role, especially as a founder, 99% of the people you interact with on a day-to-day basis either work for you or are selling you something. So even if you have a close friend who's like, yeah, I have a great marketing agency that works for me and I'm really close friends with the founder. But at the end of the day, like, yes, maybe they're friends and they're like professional friends, but at the end of the day, they're still like, you're still their client. They're still making money from you. So like, you can't really go and be like, fuck them, dude. They just blew this. There's like, they just completely fucked this campaign. You know what I mean? Whatever, like just complaining about them. If you, let's say, yeah, maybe it's something you're just trying to blow off steam, but the reality is that you can't really do that, to them, obviously. And you can't go to your employees and be like, can you relate to me? Because obviously your employees think that you're rich and, riding off into the sunset of their hard work a lot of times, depending on their feeling for, you. But anyway, point being is that like, even if you get along really well with your staff, like you still, the relationship is just different. So I think that's what drew people to the idea of a community. And then because we put in systems of like, okay, what's our criteria of who we want in here? I thought of it kind of like as a party. being who you go when you go to a party, who's there matters. You know what I mean? Like if you just throw a bunch of random people that are completely different from each other, it's not going to be a good vibe. So early on, the fact that we created that system of like people have to apply, they have to fit a certain criteria. We're not by any means religious of like, oh, you have to prove to me and I have to like go through your financial records to prove that you're doing 7 figures. Like, no, I can kind of gauge and tell just by looking at a brand and based on how they fill out their application and whatnot. So it's like, we're not being super, super strict about everything, but at the same time, having that level of filter just make sure that there's people have the right mindset when they join. So again, I think in terms of having a clear vision for what we were creating, I didn't have a specific clear vision. It just kind of started just naturally evolving based on who I wanted to associate with and talk to,
And it basically just went viral. I mean, you weren't like planning for it, or I mean, you just started this for yourself in a way, and then it kind of like grew from there.
I think that's also another important thing is I think that people that create communities should be creating something for themselves first. I think that's why I've seen a lot of communities get created post me getting into this space. And I've seen a lot of them fail or the engagement die. Obviously, anyone who has a Slack community, I'm sure that's something that they've seen or combated or whatever. I think that at the end of the day, like it's one of the only channels and content sources that makes a lot of sense. Like, oh yeah, I have an email newsletter, I have a podcast. I've seen a lot of people just be like, oh, well, I'm going to create community too. And I feel like they don't really understand why they're creating it. And because they don't actually want to use it themselves, that kind of like vibe bleeds into how they approach people, and you can feel it. And you also see why those communities, like Slack communities, are known and having a reputation for being dead. Like they're a dime a dozen. People create them all the time.
I think there has to be something very authentic about a community. I mean, it's very different than just shooting out like a million emails to people.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, like just writing a blog. I mean, the community is like, it goes both ways. You're communicating with people, and I mean, you have to contribute content. They respond. You speak to them, so it has to be much more authentic than just shooting out like an email blast or whatever.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even with content, you can create great content, but I think also like how you approach a community, definitely like people can feel that a lot more. And it's also, you have to be willing to really even engage in your own community,
And in terms of engagement, I mean, so anyone can basically engage there. It's not like you are managing it or you are creating all the content or anything like that, right?
Initially, when we started, my main goal, and I still to this day kind of do this a bit, is I make sure that every single person that posts something gets a response. So at no point does anyone speak into the darkness and get nothing back. So like I initially had to do a lot of the heavy lifting with that, where like, someone says something, I had to either pull from my own knowledge and respond to them, or research the answer and try and get them a response, or at least give them a reaction. So specifically to Slack, like anytime a message comes through, I automatically auto-save it. So it goes in my save later. If we want to go into the nitty gritty of like managing a Slack group now, and any questions you have on that, we can go into that.
I mean, I think it's interesting just because you speak about the principles of like when because you see that also on Facebook groups, like you're saying that when you start the community, you want everyone to get a response. So you want to create engagement. That's like part of like how you engage people. It's like with SaaS, like how you get acquisition, activation. That's part of activation, how you get them into the group and feel that the group is alive and they get responses for what they do. I mean, we did quite a lot of that in the ride sharing app. We would, like when everybody requested or posted a ride, we built an army of bots basically that would reply to them, so they feel like you say they're not publishing something into the darkness, that they're not alone. It's very important. They do the same thing in poker. They have bots playing with you, so you're not playing alone in the beginning. So here it's more difficult because you really need to create engagement.
Yeah, I was going to say to that basically is that it's a massive time commitment to basically leverage. But the other thing too is that like if someone like calls out into the darkness and they get nothing once or twice, they're done. They're never gonna comment again. You know what I mean? Their perception of this community and the value it brings to them is immediately diminished to zero. And basically that goes to an inactive user. And then every inactive user you get on a community, ultimately the collective as a whole becomes less valuable, because basically they feel that they didn't get what they needed out of the community. Therefore, they feel less inclined to reciprocate and basically give that value back in.
Today it's probably much more. I mean, it's grown, so there's engagement. You don't need to like facilitate all the engagement, right?
I don't facilitate all the engagement. I definitely do still do a lot of heavy lifting for the community. So obviously my goal is at some point the community gets large enough and has enough of a large enough engaged user base that I don't have to. But oftentimes it is nice now that it's getting to a point where like, oh, I'm busy, I'm working on something else. Someone asks a question, I bookmark it for later to be like, hey, I'm going to respond to them like maybe tomorrow if I have free time to make sure they get a response. Go back and there's like 30 responses and 30 replies. I'm like, oh, this is like, and I just like remove it from my saved, or I might read it myself just to learn a little something. But it's nice to now at this point where like maybe half the time, maybe 75% of the time, that's what happens is someone either replies or enough where I'm like, okay, cool, that person got what they needed, or vice versa. They basically like, or an entire new thread of conversation has basically sprung from this.
So basically, people are really getting like their money is worth. I mean, it's free, but I mean, they're getting real value from that. Like, I mean, you're saying like people feel a bit like lonely as entrepreneurs or business owners. It's a kind of like lonely position, and they can go on this community and find people that are like in similar positions or facing similar challenges, right? And like asking questions, it probably feels very good for them that they can get like unique perspectives from other people, like about how they solve the challenges.
I think so. I think obviously we keep getting people asking, how do I add other people to the community? So I'm constantly telling them like, hey, just go give the same application link that you use to join. So I think overall they definitely are. We average about 2 to 3 applications a day. We only accept about 15% of the applications we get, maybe 20%, because either they're not eligible, B, they're like a service provider trying to sneak in. So they're like, oh, they own a software company and they want to basically sell to our community, and we don't allow that. So like filtering through different applications, about, I would say 15 to 20% is what we actually approve to go in. But I think the biggest things for like creating a community that's going to basically be effective, I don't think you should like anyone should really necessarily create it just because like, oh, I should create a community. I think they should think of like, what value do I want to get out of this as a user, and then maybe go and create it. But I think the other thing too, to have a successful community, you have to be willing to commit to basically making sure that every member gets value out of it. So again, if anyone calls out into the darkness, they never get nothing back. You are the one that speaks back to them. If no one else is, it's literally a live chat. Oftentimes, that's actually how in the early days, that's how I felt. I felt like I was literally running live chat for like e-commerce, because people would ask a question like, what's the best cross-border solution? And I'm like, all right, well, look through my catalog of 10 years of working on shit. What have I used? I've actually researched this exact Luckily, I have enough knowledge that I've experienced enough about almost everything at this point that I can respond to most questions. So anyway, I would respond back. But anyway, it's a lot of work to commit to make sure that basically that happens. 2, I think you have to curate who you add to communities. I've already seen a couple specific in the e-commerce space, and people create communities and be like, oh, and they get the same viral effect because a lot of people want to join. Very similar to basically us, is like people want to join a community, but at the end of the day, it's like I saw one community came together, they posted it, they immediately had like 3,000 members, and I keep on getting feedback from people. I get applications of people who have talked about our community in their community, saying this one's better, go join that one, or basically people in my community telling me that that's one's garbage, and the reason is because they didn't filter people. It's like you need to filter to make sure that you're not putting sharks with sheep. You know what I mean? Or not say wolves with sheep would be better.
So I think the management, like the admin and management position is very important, like to make sure that it's successful.
Yeah. So you have to actually be willing to admin basically like who's coming in. The next thing is you have to have really good onboarding. So we have created like similar from our experience with e-commerce. So like I create a bunch of flows of like, we have a set of rules. Like, you're not going to like, no one's going to post any affiliate shit. They're not going to post any garbage. Like they're a course guru. They can't come in here and post their stupid YouTube channel trying to promote and get more audience. Basically, any post that they make has to be driving more value into the community or asking a genuine question. It cannot be basically trying to extract value out of the community. And I can pretty quickly tell when people are doing that. Spamming people. So we have a set of rules. We have an onboarding flow that basically we run people through certain steps, and we try and force them to do certain things because we notice that if they complete those steps, they get more value out of it, and the rest of the community gets more value of them being there. And I've noticed that even in that process, like 30% of people drop off because and I'm actually glad of that because frankly, like we have certain rules of like, hey, when you come in, you have to introduce yourself. We have a rule where you can't, in a Slack community, you have to put a bio picture of your face, your genuine face. You have to write your full name, and you have to basically put your brand into your display name specifically. And the reason why we did that was because like some people are like, oh, I don't want to put my bio picture. I'm like, well, fuck you. because, I wouldn't want to go to dinner and sit down in a room of 10 people and one dude's wearing a bag over their face. It'd be fucking weird. You know what I mean? So put your picture on so we can see your face. Cause again, we're trying to recreate the camaraderie of in-person communication here. If you don't feel comfortable with that, leave. We don't care. Like, you're not going to provide value to the community if you're trying to be like that. Another thing is like not using your full name. It's like, okay, again, like if I'm meeting someone, I'm at like a mixer in the industry, I'm not just going to write Sam. I'm going to write, Sam Mendelsohn or whatever. So people know who I am. They can look me up online, whatever. And lastly, a big difference is just making sure people actually put their brand with their bio. Because obviously, specifically in e-commerce and other places, it tends to get to a little bit of like an environment where people will jump in and be like, oh yeah, I did $10 million this weekend, like buy my course or whatever. And you're like, okay, cool. What's your website? And they're like, oh, that's private. Like, okay. Like I guarantee you no founder of any company doing real revenue and has a real business is worried about people knowing their business. Like everyone who actually owns a real company knows it is really fucking hard. No one's going to just see your product and be like, I want to do that and rip that off, So anyway, I think it's really important to drive new members and users through a specific flow to set the right expectation of those members and then be willing to cull out people that are not going to be contributing or valuable members to the community.
Scaling your content marketing and SEO efforts can be difficult. If you're looking for a partner to help you succeed, Entail AI has the right tools to help you achieve your marketing goals. Find out more at the link in our bio or go to entail.ai to check out our range of solutions.
By the way, do you think there's any advantage to Slack versus Facebook groups, Telegram, LinkedIn?
I don't know Telegram at all. So I've heard people mention Telegram. My thought process of why I chose Slack, I think it depends. I think the biggest competitive edge you have, or the biggest like problem you have with owning a community is attention. So it's not that people like don't like the community oftentimes. It's not that they don't whatever. It's that they aren't trained to have that be part of their normal day-to-day workflow. And it's not in a real estate that they are. So I think of like, why is Starbucks the largest coffee shop in the world, or a coffee company in the world? It's not because they have necessarily the best coffee in the world. It's because they're everywhere you already are. That you don't have to train behavior to move to be like, okay, I have to train this person to put me on their route, or they have to go out of their route on their way to work. They are everywhere that you go. So they are available wherever you are. So I think the same thing with communities. You should pick whatever channel you want your community to be on, where your people will be. So if you're doing a video game community, probably a lot of those people are using Discord already. Or if you're like a hyper gamer, hyper like tech person, I know like a lot of people that are really into AI because there's a lot of other AI tools that are on Discord. So like if your users are on Discord, build it on Discord. If you're building a community for like, I have no idea what Telegram really is, to be honest, so I'm not even going to speak to that one. But let's say Facebook groups. If you're a brand, sadly, there is no solution for brands at this point that's really good beyond Facebook. So probably as a brand, most of your customers are on Facebook. If Instagram had groups, I think it would be a game changer for a lot of brands, creating communities. Unfortunately, they don't. But brands really only have the option of Facebook. And then obviously for us, it was pretty obvious. We're like, okay, we're all e-commerce professionals. We all work on Slack all day long with our own teams. Likely that's probably the best solution. So I chose a channel that was somewhere where people already were, is the main reason.
And so I understand that all the growth that you experienced was basically organic, like word of mouth, people like sharing, interested in this.
Yeah.
So you haven't done, or do you have any tips on like if somebody's starting a community or they're trying to build a community, how to get how to get discovered? Like, does it have to be with the name of the community so people can search for it? Do you share it anywhere? Do you ask people to share?
I shared it a bit, obviously on social media, and that's kind of the viral aspect of where most of its users. I think that we ran ads for a brief minute, like Facebook ads, just to test and see. We had minimal success. The quality of people that are coming through were not high. So I realized it was just one of those things. I'm like, you just have to kind of make the community as good as possible and then encourage members to share with who they know, gain that reputation. If we were monetizing it more or trying to monetize it more, I would likely be more willing to test more ways to advertise it and get the word out. But at this point, I'm like, again, because it's like, it's just a thing we basically, I use personally. And basically it's kind of, again, back to like the original thesis is like, me and Philip weren't sure what we want to create, but we damn well can be sure that like when we do have something, we have a lot of people that I feel like have a certain level of either respect for us or appreciation for what we've created. But more than that, we can also see the problems everyone's experiencing. So it's actually like we get to a direct insight into what products they need built. So if we ever want to build a software company, we basically know what is the problem everyone's talking about all the time that we know is a big problem. So we haven't really been advertising it. I think if I were to advertise something like this, like, I mean, you can't, it just all depends on what your goals are and objectives are. And again, that comes to like the CAC, like payback period kind of situation of like, how are you driving your revenue from your members? And then how much are you willing to spend? And obviously it's like every marketing channel, you know?
But by the way, are you monetizing it in any way?
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. So basically, we attempted to monetize it for a brief minute because there are a couple other paid communities out there, and like I was constantly, people were constantly telling me like, oh yeah, you know, there's like these other communities, I actually like yours better. So I was like, oh, this kind of makes sense. Like providing a lot of value, you know, we put together a bunch of resources. Like I think that it'd be nice. And also I was constantly hearing stuff where like one guy talked to another member and saved $50,000 on his NetSuite contract for his ERP purely from one conversation with another founder. Like that founder was like, yeah, he sent his contract to the other founder who was in the middle of negotiations and was like, just ask him for my price. And the guy's like, okay, cool. He asked and he saved 50 grand. So yeah, I was seeing all this value being created out of a community of people talking to each other. And I was like, okay, cool. So like we're clearly creating value for people. We're creating resources for people that are saving them time. We're getting discounts at software companies and helping them negotiate rates so they can save discounts and whatever. And so I was like, okay, well, like it makes pretty much sense. Like, so we turned the community onto a paid community for basically about 2 or 3 months. So everyone new coming in was basically paying. And what ended up happening during that period was like, one, I was like, I knew I wanted to roll out everyone being paid at some point because I was like, I don't want to have like because I'm actually part of a community where I found out I've been part of it for like a decade. And I was talking to another member and I found out like they came in earlier than me and they're paying like literally 1/8 what I was paying. So I was like, all right, if we're going to do paid, everyone has to be paying because I think that's just kind of shits on the idea of a community if people are paying different amounts. You know what I mean? And it is a kind of a bit of a collective, like, okay, we're all in this kind of together. We are getting value out of this. So like, let's all contribute the same amount. And obviously I'm spending a shit ton of time on it at this point. So it's like, it'd be nice to make some money from it, you know, and actually put some coin back in the pocket as well as have more resources to actually build more cooler things to the community. So anyway, all the new people were coming through and paying, but the big thing so I started trying to roll out basically billing to all the new members or to all the existing members, and I got like all kinds. Like one dude who messages me all the time asking questions, direct DMs. I ask him community asking me direct questions. I'm constantly asking it. I hit him up and was like, hey dude, like we're thinking about rolling it out. How do you feel about this? And he's like, oh yeah, I mean, $99 a month is a lot. Like I don't know if I really like. I don't think that really, it doesn't really hold that much value for me. And I'm like, dude, you DM me like every 3 days asking me specific questions. Like you're basically getting like a free e-commerce consultant. And I'm like, okay. And so anyway, I talked to a couple of people and a lot of people were kind of like, oh, I don't know. There's not really a high ROI on that, like whatever. And it was kind of interesting because I learned a little bit about the psychology and I should have thought about this beforehand. I realized I was like, I'm a cheap guy, like not in my life, but in my business, I'm cheap. And I'm cheap because e-commerce has very thin margins. And e-commerce founders specifically look at all costs in terms of a yearly. So if you go to someone and say like, hey, I want you to pay $99 a month, they don't think of it as $99 a month. They immediately think of it as $1,200 a month. And then they think of like, okay, if I put $1,200 into Facebook, I get $2,000 back. So anyway, point being is that the ROI, like immediately e-commerce founders are very ROI driven. So they'll think of like, okay, what is the cost multiplied? What is the ROI I'm getting? And what's interesting about a community specifically, and a community like ours, is that the ROI is basically the mistakes you don't make. So it's like
it's difficult to tie it to ROI. I mean, and you're getting tons of value there. I mean, like DMing you like every day, but it's very difficult to tie it to like specific value, specific ROI.
Well, it's also like you don't value and appreciate all the landmines you didn't step on. You know what I mean? So like like I see people like again back to that guy saving $50,000 on a NetSuite contract or whatever it might be. Like let's say I'm trying to find a marketing agency, and your options are go and ask LinkedIn, where everybody wants to sell you something and you have no idea who's good, or you can ask another founder, and that founder might recommend someone and you do it. How many hours did you save potentially?
No, if you really have a group of founders, I mean, because like you say, a founder is completely different than an employee, right?
Yeah.
Like an advice from a founder is really priceless. There's no doubt. But maybe you should try like a different business model. Like for example, I don't know, like promoting businesses there, or like getting deals.
We kind of found our positioning with what we're doing now, but the kind of the main story was it made me realize that people don't necessarily value the value that they get from not making mistakes. So for example, they don't value saving time. They don't, to a degree, they don't value saving time. They don't necessarily value saving money on contracts. So like, for example, saving $50,000, that's a pretty massive ROI on that. And also, or making like the costly mistakes you may have made had you not had that resource of people to talk to. Point being, we pushed out trying to basically roll out pricing. We tested with a couple of people. The general feedback was like, kind of like, maybe, I don't know, we'll see. And then it brought me to like, okay, so I'm going to basically just jam this down people's throats. And frankly, like, I feel like the community is a bunch of all my friends at this point. So I'm like, fuck, I don't want to like go to every friend and be just like, give me money, dude. Like, you know what I mean? So it's just like, you know what? This was just giving me the complete ick vibe. So basically what we did was we reversed it. We're basically like, all right, you know what? Fuck it. Community is free. Everyone enjoy it. Have at it. And then we basically told our existing members, hey, it's no longer mandatory, which kind of sucked because a lot of people canceled, but is what is. We went to all of our members and we're like, hey guys, like we're moving this to donation based. So like if you cancel, you're not going to lose access to the community. So basically just to let you know, because I felt wrong about just like leaving their memberships on and then telling everyone else it was going to be donation based. So anyway, I told them and I was like, hey, it's donation based. If you want to support the community, great. It's super appreciated. If not, we're not going to kick you out. You know what I mean? And then we rolled out basically to everyone else and asked like, hey, it's donation based, whatever. That has been not as successful as I would have hoped. My aspirational idea that would basically a lot of people would contribute was not well received in terms of the numbers of conversions, let's say. But that being said, it reframed a bit. Where I did appreciate changing that is that one, it doesn't give me the ick anymore, the idea of trying to sell these people something, because they are genuinely giving me value back as a founder for my own brands. And also, I just enjoy it. I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy learning about people, and I enjoy helping people. But then two, also it taught me a lot about where I really want to be focusing my time. And I realized that like, I don't really want to be selling products to e-commerce founders. You know,
as a 3PL company, you are selling them like a service, no, to like e-commerce founders, no?
I mean, I don't sell directly. Like if it comes up naturally where I feel like I can provide value. My rule for people that are selling anything, and that includes myself, is if you're going to sell people in the community, you can, like, I know there's some people that are agencies / e-commerce founders in there. I told everyone, like, if you go to someone, you can't directly sell, and I apply this rule to myself. If I'm going to go to someone and say like, hey, they need a 3PL, I'm going to DM them. But the one thing I require is that I'm also going to suggest 3 other places I know are good as well. So I'm going to say, hey, I own a 3PL. Would you like to work with us? And also, these are the 3 other 3PLs that I know are also good, just to give you options. Because I think just like DMing and being like, hey, just buy my shit is, again, it's shilly and it's not against the community. But anyway, point being is that it helped me narrow down kind of like what kind of products we want to create. Me and Philip are building me and my co-founder of Workspace 6 are currently building another product and startup that's kind of not in stealth, but we're still working out the details of it. But it's not really in the e-commerce space at all in general. And a lot of that learnings and everything else we came to was largely due to the experience we have with the community, and kind of like how we like to sell products, who we want to sell to is very important. I think realizing that like selling to e-commerce founders is a very difficult thing, and it's not necessarily something I want to do, because I have a lot of deep respect for e-commerce founders and I know how hard their lives are. And I also know that they have thin margins. So like part of me could be like, oh, well, why wouldn't someone not want to give me $99 a month for the value I know they're getting out of this community? But on the flip side, I also recognize the fact that like it is really fucking hard to be profitable with an e-commerce business. Like it is not just a given that you're going to be profitable. You're not. Most of them are not funded. Most of them have tight margins, and every dollar counts. You know what I mean? And it did make me realize I'm like I don't really necessarily want to be creating products to sell to people that are like that have that mindset because it's very difficult. You know what I mean? Their lives are difficult, and it's a difficult selling process. You know what I mean? It's difficult to prove that kind of ROI to people.
You're saying that even because you're saying some of the brands that are in your community, they may have like, I don't know, like a 10, 20, $30 million business. So even them are struggling with like low margin.
Well, I mean, it's just the mindset you get trained to in a business like that. Like just because you make $20 million doesn't mean you're profitable every month. You know what I mean? Like there's certain months of the year where you're losing literally like hundreds of thousands of dollars. You know what I mean? Or vice versa. The level of complexity, and Adam can speak to this as well, is like you're placing POs that you're having to buy and forecast inventory months in advance with the hope that you're going to be able to sell that. You know what I mean? And then you have like you take out loans or credit card or whatever else, and you have to go pay that. So it's just I think it breeds a mindset of very, very, very ROI driven, very numbers oriented people that are very like every dollar counts. And it just made me realize it doesn't, like, the community completely aside now, it made me realize that I just simply don't want to be selling to people products to those types of people, because they're like, unless I have a product that drives that massive amount of value, I just simply don't want to be focusing on trying to sell like e-commerce founders products, because they're a challenging bunch to sell to. I'd say that, you know what I mean? And rightfully so. You have to basically have a good product. And I think even my own journey as an e-commerce founder in the past couple of months, I've realized like I had a lot of software I was paying for. I was like, why the fuck? Like when times are good or like things are easy during COVID, it's like.
But I can tell you, like, as a software company, I mean, there's also challenges there. I mean, us at Entail, we're pretty different because we built this company as kind of like a service, and we funded the entire like development of the software. Like we started by selling, and then we built the software to it was like building an agency and automating it. Okay. So we started more like an agency and then added more and more software to just build the entire platform. But for most software companies, their struggles, they do have a lot of struggles as well. I mean, they need to develop software, so it's very expensive. So most of them need to chase investors all the time,
My counter argument to that, and not that there's obviously all businesses are hard. So like, let me put that out there, is that all business is hard. But one thing I've experienced from doing the 3PL business, e-commerce business, and now developing a software product, they're not equally hard. Like the reason why e-commerce is so difficult is because in software development, and unless I'm just naive, and again, I don't understand the industry, in software, you don't have to spend a $2 million PO for a product and pay for it now of something that's not going to come for 9 months, that you don't know if people is going to be, let's say it's fashion. You don't know that's.
You don't have inventory.
Yeah. Well, you're buying inventory, you're paying for it up front. There's a lag time of the inventory getting to you. And you God hope that basically when that arrives, that particular style is in season or fashionable. So like, what if you, like, for example, we had 1 year with our fashion products where we basically out of nowhere, for whatever reason, that year, jumpsuits were not popular at all with our female customers. Could not sell them. We had like two jumpsuits. The following year, those two products became our top sellers with no change, no difference in colors, no difference in photography, nothing. Because they were not popular the previous year on that season, we didn't buy a lot of it. You know what I mean? So we're like, oh, well, whatever. And then out of nowhere, the sales velocity at a certain time of year just went. I think, again, who knows? Maybe it's like taste change, whatever. Anyway, point being is I've noticed that, like, again, it's a very complex business because of the fine line. And at the end of the day, with software or even service businesses, the capital that you're spending is people, and people are something that you can cut at any time. Yes, it affects the product, the speed of delivery of the product, maybe the quality of the product. But at the end of the day, you can, like, if you need to cut costs, you can cut people, and you can do that. You can drop that cost really fast. Versus with e-commerce, if you already have a production run in your sale, you need to cut back on spending. Suddenly you're like, well, I'm cutting back on spending, but I still have that $1 million PO that I already put in that I'm now legally required to pay. You know what I mean? That the manufacturer has already produced, and I've already paid for half of it. there's just a sales cycle to it that's so much longer that there's like the fine tuning of adjusting to everything is a lot more difficult. And then at the end of the day, your margin is just not as good, you know?
We have kind of like the same thing because we have both the software and the services. The services really help us to scale much faster because we start by using the software ourselves, so we don't need to develop it to the same level, the same degree as you would when you're selling it to somebody else. I mean, even if it's buggy in the beginning and so on, our team uses it, so it makes it much easier. And also by selling services, you increase your margin, you get more money from your customers. So like our average customer is at about $5,000 a month. So we can work with like large customers, we can grow faster. But then the flip side of that is, you have services in your business, and that can be a pain in the ass as well. Sometimes it's difficult to scale. People bug you about quality, about whatever. So
I think, in my personal opinion, services / software is the next future of all. Like, if a software company is going to be a software company, it needs to be services and software, like you guys are building, because obviously with AI, building things is going to get faster and easier, which means that moat of what you create is going to be more and more difficult to maintain and defend, because it's going to be very easy for people to come out with a copycat of whatever you do. And then alternative to that, basically with services, one, that requires a certain moat of quality and experience. So like you can't just turn on AI and be experienced necessarily on everything. It's a good tool to help people, but again, it's not going to make it whatever. But the other thing too, I was looking at your guys' site with the marketplace and the experts you basically onboarded, you're basically building a network effect of human connection where basically an AI cannot recreate human connection. You know what I mean? So it's like having that two-way marketplace or that kind of network of experts basically that you work with. At the end of the day, regardless of whether or not AI will be a tool to help people, at the end of the day is, I think, leaning into specifically, again, services and or anything to do with networks of people. At the end of the day, the actual software that basically allows us to do everything that we do will become cheaper, easier, and faster to develop. But where people spend their time and how they basically interact with each other, if you can get that to be in your ecosystem, that's a massive moat that basically cannot be attacked, because it's very hard to train humans to move to do something else. Again, a coffee shop with better coffee is not going to get people that go to Starbucks to go to them because it's simply not on their way to work.
Thank you for listening to the Entail AI podcast. Join us next time for another masterclass when we sit down with a marketing luminary to reveal their path to success.